Hello and welcome to the Texas Tribune TribCast for Tuesday, January 27th. I'm Eleanor Klibanoff, wearing real pants for the first time since Thursday. If anything could get me into the office in an ice storm or a post-ice storm, it is TribCast. I am not joined this week by my usual co-host, Editor-in-Chief Matthew Watkins, whose love of TribCast is not as strong as mine, and he would not put on hard pants to come in and do this. No, I believe he is slightly inconvenienced by Austin schools still being out and a little bit of our post-ice storm chaos. But we are not here to talk about the ice storm. This week, we are looking at how a decision made hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C., and executed thousands of miles away in Venezuela can have huge impacts here in Texas. Of course, talking about oil, a huge part of our economy, a bigger part of our lore as a state, and to discuss what the impact of the Venezuela upheaval will have on Texas, I'm joined by Texas Tribune energy and industry reporter Paul Cobbler. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Eleanor. Thanks for having me. I am also wearing pants for the first time in quite a few days and feeling like a human again, so that's definitely nice.
And it's important that we say that because we're sitting behind a table, so people can't tell if we're wearing pants, but we are, and we'd like to be clear about that. And our other guest, Jack Balasia, the executive director of the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Energy Center at the University of Texas. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Eleanor. Paul, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jack served as vice president and general counsel for ExxonMobil from 2010 to 2016. Prior to his 2-decade career at Exxon, Jack was in private practice specializing in oil and gas, business litigation, and First Amendment law. He is also, and I want to put a disclaimer on how we ended up getting Jack on the podcast. I said to Paul, we're going to do an episode on oil in Texas and Venezuela. Who do you recommend? He said, there's this guy at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Institute, Jack Balasia. I said, fantastic. We should perhaps loop in our ace investigative reporter, Kate McGee Balasia. You guys probably know Kate McGee as our, a phenomenal investigative reporter, my desk mate, perhaps what you might call in popular parlance, my work wife. She is, in the eyes of the law, more formally married to her actual husband, Michael Balasia, who is your son, Jack, right?
Correct.
And to be clear, I just know Jack as an expert on Texas oil and gas.
Yes,
and now I know he wears multiple hats.
Yes. And side note, as much as I love Kate, we love Michael, one of my favorite people on the planet. So big fan.
Well, that makes three of us.
Yeah, big fan of the Balasia household. But that is, again, also not what we're here to discuss. So, Jack, maybe you can start. Just tell us a little bit about the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Energy Center and the work you all do there.
Yeah, you bet. The Kay Bailey Hutchinson Energy Center was started about 11 years ago on campus. It was a joint project of the law school and the business school. Today, the engineering school and the geoscience school participate as contributors to the center. Our goal at KBH is to try to encourage students who are studying all aspects of energy, whether it be renewables, oil and gas, geothermal, nuclear. We want to make the University of Texas a safe place to study all kinds of energy. So we want to help students who are pursuing careers in any of the energy fields that are available. Last year, we touched about 1,000 students through some of our programs. That number keeps going up, and of course, our goal is to have it continue to grow. We have a student advisory council where students can participate in our activities and have an energy studies minor, which is a summer program that allows students to have a concentrated curriculum in energy that goes on their transcript. We have a graduate fellows program. Right now, it's limited to the law school and the business school, where we select high-achieving students to participate in the fellows program and write op-eds and research papers on energy issues. And then probably our other big event is our symposium. We have an annual symposium every year. We just had our 11th annual symposium in September. ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods was our keynote speaker, and we had the largest audience we've ever had, almost 700 people. So that's kind of what the center does. We continue to grow our programs to increase participation, and it's a way to encourage students who are interested in energy careers at the University of Texas.
Amazing. Let's sort of just talk about where the oil industry stands right now in Texas. I know oil prices have sort of been down. Paul, I don't know if you want to sort of set the table on where the oil industry, let's say, pre-Venezuela, going into 2026, how are things looking?
Yeah, so they're fine, I think would be the best way to describe it. I mean, prices are around $60 a barrel, which is not, you're not going gangbusters in terms of the money that you can make, but it's not a total collapse of the market either. And so that's been fairly unsteady, something that folks have been watching. We've all seen, I think, gas prices go down over the past couple of years. But the expectation is that they're going to go up at a certain point. There's energy demand globally is rising in Western nations due to AI. In developing nations, there is a really intense demand right now for dispatchable power units like natural gas as those countries continue to energize more and more. And so the expectation is that there's going to be a greater need for oil in the years to come, and those prices are going to start going up. And the Texas market is poised to capitalize on that. It's basically the situation going into Venezuela.
Right. Again, end of this year. I mean, Jack, what is your sense of having watched the market for many decades? Where are we sort of in the inevitable boom and bust cycle here in Texas?
Yeah, I think we're in a kind of a stable place. I think Paul did a good job predicting, or his predictions about what might happen, I think, are fair. I think the economy is growing. From the pandemic was kind of the low point of the oil business. Price of oil at some point went actually negative for a day, I think. And since then, it has rebounded. It's back down. It's in a place now where gasoline prices are low, where companies now have the ability to produce oil at a much lower cost. So even $60 oil is attractive to them. So I think the outlook for the industry is excellent, especially in Texas.
Right. And I mean, as we've already seen over the last couple of years, global affairs can have a huge impact on the oil industry. We saw a huge impact from the war in Ukraine. Now, obviously, we've added this other variable with Venezuela. Jack, talk to us about just Venezuela and the sort of what Venezuela represents in the oil world.
Well, as you said, I think it's the largest, has maybe the largest reserves of oil in the world. A little bit of history, American oil companies went into Venezuela in the 1920s after oil was discovered. And they were very active in Venezuela. At one point, Venezuela was the largest supplier of crude oil to the United States. And then in the 1970s, the industry was nationalized. The government took over the assets of the American oil companies. And then in 1992, the president of the country reprivatized the industry. All the oil companies went back in, and then in 2007, President Chavez renationalized the oil companies by requiring that 93% of the assets of the production go to the government. ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips refused to accept those terms, and their assets were taken over by the government. Chevron agreed to that arrangement and continues to produce there to this day. So that's sort of a quick history of the Venezuelan and American oil company experience.
And I think economically, it's worth sort of thinking of Venezuela as one of like the original petrostates. Like when you think of that, I mean, their economy is pretty singularly motivated by oil and by oil prices. I mean, they do not really have any other exports. They used to export coffee in big ways back in the day, but that economy has really become dependent on oil prices. And this government, the socialist government, spends a lot of money on social programs for its citizens, and so with these kind of boom and bust cycles that you see in oil and gas, and with that spending from the government, that has also created a lot of economic problems really throughout the decades. I mean, we're going back to the 70s of, there are these periods where they are rich and they can spend their money on sort of anything they want, but the sort of lack of a rainy day fund being created there has created a lot of issues, especially going into the 2000s. And then with U.S. sanctions beginning under the Trump administration in 2016, it's really destabilized their economy in a big way.
It's really interesting. I mean, my understanding just from reading about this a little bit, right, is like if, just purely based on the amount of oil underground in Venezuela, if this was like in Texas or in, somewhere where there were sort of not these economic issues, these sort of political instability issues around it, it would be, gushers, right? Like this would be like there's a huge amount of oil. The issue is more above ground in how we're accessing that oil, it seems like.
If only it was that easy.
Yeah,
and it
right.
was just a lake.
Just snap your fingers. Yeah, right. Well, I mean, that is certainly, I think, sort of how it's President Trump is talking about this as like, we can come in. He has said, to quote him, and I won't do the voice, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust for a long time. He said, we're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. Obviously, we cannot just snap our fingers and start doing that. Jack, what do you see as the barriers to suddenly, trying to create this oil or get the companies in the United States companies to sort of rehash the Venezuelan oil market?
Yeah, I think, Eleanor, I think there's some irrational exuberance in some of those statements coming out of Washington. A couple of things that oil companies look for. They look for stability, political stability, economic stability. These are companies that are prepared to invest billions and billions of dollars, and they want to make sure that they get a return on those dollars and that those investments are being protected. They need a stable U.S. policy. U.S. policy keeps flipping back and forth. So that kind of weighs against going into a place like Venezuela. Venezuelan oil production today is less than, it's decreased more than 70% since its peak in the 1990s. And it's going to take, I've seen some reports that suggest it's going to take $100 billion just to get the infrastructure back to where they can go back to producing at the peaks they were in the 1990s. And to ask people to come, to ask companies who have to answer to their shareholders to put in hundreds of billions of dollars in a place where the stability is questionable, I think that's a big ask.
Yeah, and I think it's also that number of 100 billion, I've heard as much of 150 billion. All the oil companies combined in the world last year invested about $75 billion. So
in sort of
in just anything, in
general, all their activities.
Yeah, in general investments. So what you're saying, in one country, the amount of money that would be needed to get them back to where they were, 20 years ago would take more than every oil company in the world spent last year.
That's,
Paul, that's a really good point, and I don't mean to interrupt.
Please.
That's a really good point. But the other thing I want to mention is that publicly traded oil companies today are much more disciplined than they were before the pandemic. And one thing that investors have demanded of those companies is fiscal discipline and cash flow. And those are two things that they're very, very confident, very conscious of, and have to come into play when deciding whether to put an investment in the Permian, in the Anadarko Basin, or am I going to go to Venezuela where the risk is much, much higher?
And that risk is, I think, the important part. The situation on the ground is really, I think, what a lot of folks are looking at, and we don't have a lot of clarity on. And, I'm certainly not going to ask Jack to speculate on the future of Venezuelan politics. But, something I was struck by in the days after this operation to capture Maduro, there was a State Department memo warning Americans to get out of the country because there were armed gangs roaming the streets. That is not a country that sounds like a safe investment right now. And, obviously, President Trump and the Venezuelan vice president, now president, have been apparently been having good conversations. It seems like there's some efforts towards reconciliation there, but this is still the Maduro regime, who many conservative members of Congress would like to see completely rid of. There's questions about when elections might happen, who the next leader might be. I don't think any of us have the answer to any of these things. And it seems that the administration's focus, recently has been on Greenland and now Minneapolis. And, it's kind of unclear what's going to come next. I think that's a lot of what everybody's waiting for, is like, what is going to be the next shoe to drop in Venezuela? And I don't know.
Right, because it's not just money, right? Like, I mean, I was reading some interviews with people who talked about, sort of in the previous era when there were more American oil companies on the ground there. I mean, people talked about they lived in Venezuela for periods of time. They brought their families to Venezuela. Like, there was a degree of sort of American compounds, American oil cities there. I mean, you need people, you need engineers, you need so much there to rebuild that. That's not just money. And like you said, I mean, if the State Department is saying, don't go to Venezuela, and we're also saying we need oil companies to put a lot of boots on the ground in Venezuela to get this back up and running. That's a
conflicting
potential
messaging.
Conflict. Yeah. I mean, Jack, what is your sense? I mean, you talked about sort of this perhaps fiscal discipline, maybe a little bit of like risk aversion from the oil companies right now, just in general. When we think about sort of investing, like you said, like you can invest in the Permian or you could invest in Venezuela. I mean, what do you think? And then adding in on top of that, you've got President Trump, who is obviously a very influential figure. And sort of, how do you think that these companies are balancing all of these competing pressures?
Well, that's a really good question. If you look at what they said at the press conference or at the meeting in the White House, I think the Exxon Mobil CEO Darren Woods called Venezuela uninvestable. There were some of the executives from some of the smaller companies seemed to be a whole lot more enthusiastic about it. But I'm pessimistic that we're going to see a lot of activity, American money, American employees heading into Venezuela to start on some brand new venture. I think things are still too unstable for that to happen. Chevron is there. They've been operating there for a long time, and they seem to be able to continue the operations that they're doing under their U.S. license. But are they prepared to grow that investment? I can't say. I don't know.
Right. What would be the impact, or what potentially is the impact for, let's say, Texas and the West Texas oil fields and things like that, if suddenly there was a lot more oil gushing out of Venezuela?
Well, I think realistically, even if we assume that everybody's ready to go in there, you're not going to see any significant increases in production for some time. And, the way the markets work, oil is a worldwide market. It's influenced obviously by supply and demand. It's influenced by economic activity. It's influenced by political events. So it's kind of hard to predict. I do know that there are some American refineries that were set up specifically to handle this kind of heavy crude. They would probably welcome that crude because it's cheaper and can be refined into products and improve the margins. So I think it's uncertain. I don't really expect it to all of a sudden happen and glut the market with crude oil. That's just not in the near term.
Right. I think, we didn't even really see immediately oil prices shift that much. Like, the market isn't really necessarily freaking out in response to this.
No.
Certainly not that there doesn't seem to be this immediate threat of like everything's going to change overnight.
Yeah. And that's what I've heard from energy economists, from, oil companies, is they are not really worried about this right now. I mean, obviously they are maybe worried about the comments for the president and sort of how they're going to handle all of that. But as far as like economic concerns of there being an oil glut, like Jack mentioned, like that is not something we're worried about in the short term. It's like what I said earlier, what I think folks are really thinking about is the rising energy demand across the world and meeting those needs. If suddenly Venezuela came online in a big way, that would help a lot with those energy demands. But that is just, for all the reasons that we stated in the last couple questions, that is not something that we think is going to happen anytime soon. With the caveat also, though, that markets can change very quickly, especially in oil and gas. I mean, I
Sure.
was thinking when Jack was talking about the negative price of oil, and then it was 2 years later that the war in Ukraine started, and gas prices skyrocketed, and they've stabilized since then. Who knows where we'll be in 2027?
Right. Like if there's anything we know about oil is that it
Boom and bust,
boom
famously.
and bust. Yes. But I will say, there obviously will always be some people willing to take the risk or to try to get in there. Reuters had some reporting about, some of these smaller, I mean, they were even calling, like these like wildcatters, sort of reminiscent of the era of, discovering the Texas oil fields, of like people who are going to try to like make a buck off of this, people who are going to see like, can we get something up? I mean, the CEO of Halliburton was saying on an earnings call that, his phone was, quote, ringing off the hook. They exited Venezuela in 2020, but they're working on securing licenses to return. The former head of Chevron in Africa and Latin America, who's now with a group in Houston, saying that they've been preparing for years to enter Venezuela. But, saying they're in early stage talks, to raise as much as $2 billion, which, as we said, is a lot of money, but it's not quite even close to what it would take to meaningfully stand up the energy economy in Venezuela. Do you expect, Jack, to see, I mean, is this the kind of thing where we can see like incremental steps and incremental projects, or is your sense that it's like we're either going into Venezuela in a big way or it's not really going to have an impact?
No, I think it's going to be incremental, Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
There may be some small companies that are willing to go in there and, as you say, sort of be the wildcatters and take a chance. But I don't think that will make a significant difference in what we see in Venezuela. I don't think it'll be dramatic in terms of increasing production. I think until the infrastructure is fixed, and that's going to be a long-term effort, I don't think we're going to see much improvement in oil production from Venezuela.
And I think the way things are sort of leave Chevron is the biggest potential winner out of this. I mean, they're the ones who are already there, who have staff on the ground, who have equipment on the ground, and certainly needs to be built out and improved. But, they are the ones that stayed. And I think the expectation that, and they did have their stock prices go up a little bit in the wake of the invasion, kind of just with the expectation that they are the best position one to take advantage of this, but it's not in any big way. There's still not any major expectation that this is something that's going to happen in the next months or even year or more.
Right. You mentioned this, Jack, that there are some refineries here, I mean, particularly on the coast of Texas and Louisiana, that were built specifically to process the oil out of Venezuela, which, as I understand it, is it's stickier, it's cruder, it's like less.
They call it sour.
Yes, it's sour next to our sweet
Texas
oil.
No one is actually tasting the oil. I want to make that clear. I had to look this up.
I don't know. I can't attest to that.
I think the word, Eleanor, is viscous. It is a very thick, viscous. It's a very thick, almost tar-like substance.
Well,
very interesting.
And just the kind of the science on this is there's high amounts of sulfur in heavier oil, and that's kind of where the sour versus the sweet thing comes from. And the Permian Basin, like you said, has a lot of the sweet, lower sulfur content oil, and we used to get heavier oil out of it in the Eagle Ford Shale, but it was the fracking boom that really started and gave us access to more of this lighter crude oil. And so it's these refineries along the Gulf Coast. They really are just like not getting the heavy oil they used to since we stopped importing from Venezuela. And we get a lot of our heavy crude oil now from Canada. And Canada is someone we're thinking about as we kind of discuss the winners and losers out of potential access to Venezuelan oil.
Because they are sort of providing that heavy.
They're our primary crude importer right now. Yeah.
And this is like an oil novice question. Do we need crude oil and sweet oil, or does crude oil have to be turned into sweet oil to be useful? Jack, I don't know if that's a distinction.
But no, it does not have to be turned into sweet oil. It's actually turned into, I guess some of it is probably turned into some sweet oil, but they have the ability to extract the sulfur, to do the things and make product out of everything that's in that viscous crude, so that nothing goes to waste. And as I said earlier, it is cheaper because it is a less attractive crude. It has to have more. It has to be refined more.
And so potentially, again, long down the road, if we are able to get, meaningful oil out of Venezuela, that would be a boom potentially for these refineries that were built to handle that.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Because it's like Jack said, like in its purest state, this heavier oil is cheaper, so it's easier to bring in. It's going to take more, and it takes more advanced equipment to be able to refine. And I think something worth kind of, when we think of the Venezuelan infrastructure, like they have one of the largest refineries in the world there, but it employs about 7,000 people, largely whom are loyalists to the current regime because they actually fired all of the previous employees back in the 2000s under Hugo Chavez. And since then, there have been a number of issues with accidents, with corruption, and that refinery's capacity has dropped in the years since then. So like that's kind of just, it's not even just an equipment issue, it's like a human capital thing too. I mean, I think when we think about the immigration crisis that we saw out of Venezuela, I mean, these are experts in the oil industry. It was their primary export that were leaving the country and are, Texas is presumably benefiting from that in some way also. There are Venezuelans that live in the Midland and Odessa area that I've talked to that, work in the oil fields. And, that is not an easy thing to just quickly reverse. And so, yeah, like it's you need these advanced refineries that Texas has that Venezuela doesn't really have in a big way. So if we are going to see heavy increased exports of heavy oil from Venezuela, it's probably going to have to be coming to the Gulf.
Interesting. Jack, if we sort of think separate from Venezuela, or if we're like being realistic that Venezuela is not likely to be a major, shifting majorly what is happening in the Permian Basin and Texas's oil economy, what are the challenges that Texas's oil economy faces sort of separate from the Venezuela question? What were the issues beforehand, and what are the prognosis?
Well, I think the Permian is still going great guns, but it is. I don't know whether it's peaked yet or whether it is on a decline. I know that the prediction is that the wells in the Permian will continue to decline. But I think what we always forget about when we think about the decline of oil and gas production, we forget how important technology is and innovation is and how that can change the outlook overnight. That's certainly what happened with fracking, with horizontal wells. We went into shales, which before nobody could get the crude or the gas out of those. That's kind of where the products actually were born, originated. So I think the outlook for the industry is great. I heard an economist with Goldman Sachs last week say that the outlook in Texas for the Texas oil and gas industry in 2026 is excellent. So my expectation is that the industry will continue to thrive. It will continue to innovate. And I think we're in pretty good shape.
And I think that's kind of like as long as we're comparing Texas and Venezuela. I mean, the Texas drilling industry is one of the most, if not the most advanced in the world. I mean, there are these refineries we've discussed, but I think even just thinking about like the state, how big the economy is in the state of Texas, we've got the roads, we've got the power lines, we've got the ports, we've got the refineries, we've got advanced technology that is allowing us to find and discover oil and gas in new ways. This is not a market that can be undercut very easily.
And stability, which I think you guys both sort of said was a key difference there. I mean, even as Texas is becoming a leader in a lot of different renewable energies, the state has made it clear they really want to continue to prioritize and invest in oil in a big way.
Exactly.
One thing please go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Well, not only are we the largest oil and gas producer in the U.S., but we're also the largest producer of renewable energy in the U.S. So I think these two different types of energy production are living side by side and doing so very well.
Right. Just Texas, the energy hub,
Exactly.
No caveat needed, right? We're not being picky about what kind of energy we're creating.
We just have a lot of it.
Just a lot of energy. Yeah. Well, I mean, on that, and Paul, this is a slight pivot, but you've written about recently sort of this demand for more energy coming out of data centers, AI. I mean, what is the outlook there in terms of what Texas will need energy, whether it's oil, renewables, or anything in the coming years?
Well, the forecasts are pretty eye-popping. ERCOT, who is our nonprofit that basically manages the grid in the state of Texas.
I think after the last week, everybody knows ERCOT. If you
Sorry.
forgot ERCOT, you remember ERCOT after the last
Please,
couple of
yeah.
days.
There was a time. I was talking to somebody about this. There was a time in 2020 where no one had ever heard of ERCOT.
I know.
I'm from Texas, and I had never heard of ERCOT.
Right.
Now,
I think ERCOT would have preferred that.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But so they had this forecast a couple years ago that the Texas is going to have a demand of about 150 gigawatts, which may, just 150 gigawatts is 1,000 megawatts. And, we keep kind of building this out from there. But like that is a huge amount of energy demand. And our peak that we have ever had, our record peak is about 85 gigawatts.
Sorry, so we will need 150 gigawatts, and our peak has been 85 gigawatts.
Right.
Okay.
So quite a bit more.
A jump.
Yes, quite a jump. And this is by 2030. And this is driven, like you said, by data centers. Texas has also become recently the crypto capital of the world, ever since China banned the practice a number of years ago. And so basically, like there is an acknowledgement that we need a lot more power, and it really doesn't matter where it comes from. I think sort of the politicking over fossil fuels versus renewable energy is really not something that you hear when you talk to these folks. They're kind of just trying to make it work to have a diverse grid. I think something that a lot of folks aren't thinking about right now too, tied to data centers, is this growth of storage capacity of batteries. The technology around battery storage has just jumped by leaps and bounds over just like the last 5 years. And we now have the ability to put these batteries on the grid that can hold like 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts of power. And they can just basically like think in a 2021 Uri situation, that when we start losing generation capacity because oil pipelines are freezing or because solar panels are covered in snow, these batteries can turn on in the blink of an eye and suddenly be providing that power to give ERCOT time to sort of manage whatever situation is happening. And so that is also becoming a huge thing. And they played a big part this weekend, coming online in situations where there was strain on the grid. These batteries now really provide a pretty significant backstop to what we're doing. So I think there are a lot of exciting things happening right now. I think we have a market that is truly free in the Texas energy market, and it currently looks like it's meeting these demands in sort of new and advanced ways. But I think we have a long road ahead of us the next 5 years, and then there's also like a lot of questions about how legit are these forecasts going to be. I think there's a lot of building that is happening right now from these data centers, but will all of that materialize? Where will the AI industry go from here over the next 5 years? I think there's been a lot of questions over a bubble. It certainly seems like it is a very, very valuable industry one way or the other. But, is it going to be a further, 65 gigawatts of generation valuable? I'm not totally sure. But it's definitely something that at this point in time, the grid operators are meeting.
Jack, is that your sense that we're sort of expanding all different forms of energy in a way to sort of meet the demand that Texas is going to pose, or Texas is going to require in the coming years?
Yeah, and I think Paul did a good job outlining it. I think the numbers are huge. Are they real? That's the other question. I think not. I think they're probably overinflated. I think when it comes right down to it, in terms of actually, putting the shovel in the ground and moving the dirt, I think the numbers are going to be less than that, and I think Texas is well poised to probably meet that demand.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, I was out in West Texas for like another story, and it's oil derricks next to the wind turbines, next to the data centers, next to the solar farms. It's just all sort of coming online or remaining online.
Yeah. And there's probably a battery in there too.
Absolutely, yeah. They're building battery farms. Yeah, it's really amazing to see. Great. Well, this has been wonderful. I think we'll leave it there. But, if we suddenly start investing billions of dollars in Venezuela, we'll bring you guys back and talk about, what that future looks like. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you,
Paul,
Jack.
thanks for being here
Thank you
and
for
putting
having me.
on hard pants.
Absolutely.
And we will leave it there. You can get the TribCast anywhere you get your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube. Our producers are Rob and Chris. They also wrote the theme music. And we will see you next week.